When I hear you give your reasons, the thing always appears to me to be so ridiculously simple that I could easily do it by myself. So at each successive instance at your reasoning, I am baffled, until you explain your process. And yet I believe that my eyes are as good as yours. Quite so. You see, but you do not observe. The distinction is clear. For example, you have frequently seen the steps which lead up from the hall to this room. Frequently. How often? Well, some hundreds of times. Then, how many are there? How many? I don't know. Quite so. You have not observed. And yet you have seen. That is just my point. Now, I know there are 17 steps because I have both seen and observed. Now the question is, do you see or do you observe? In this video, we will explore the topic of how to think like Sherlock Holmes. And I got the idea or the inspiration for this video from the fantastic book Mastermind by Maria Konnikova. Many topics of this video are based on her book, so you can also see this video as a sort of summary of this fantastic book. First, we will take a short look at how different Holmes and Watson approach thinking. Then, we will look at Holmes' 5-step process of thinking and then bring it all together in a practical example which we can apply to our own lives. In the end, we will look at what technique Sherlock Holmes uses to remember all the information. We have, metaphorically speaking, two systems of thinking in our heads. System 1, or System Watson, thinks fast, intuitive, and automatically. System Watson is at work when we react in milliseconds to a dangerous situation before we get even conscious of it. System 2, or System Holmes, is thoughtful and rational. System Holmes is at work when we sit down, reflect on the situation, and look at our learnings. A short note, System 1 and 2 do not literally exist in the body. They are theoretically constructs that should explain physical processes in our brains. It is more like System 1 does X, is a shortcut for X occurs automatically. To think more like Sherlock Holmes, we have to move from our System 1 or System Watson to our System 2 or our System Holmes. This brings us back to the introduction story. What is the difference between seeing and observing, and how do we can possibly enhance our observing? What Holmes is really telling Watson when he contrasts seeing and observing is to never mistake mindlessness for mindfulness, a passive approach with an active involvement. We see automatically a stream of sensory inputs that requires no effort on our part, save that of opening our eyes. But when we observe, we are forced to pay attention. We have to move from passive absorption to active awareness. We have to engage. It is true for everything, not just sight, but each sense, each input, each thought. In the quote, the first part is to be mindful, to pay active attention. When we don't pay active attention what's in front of us or what's around us, then how should we observe? Normally, we walk mindlessly through our environment, seeing probably everything, like perceiving everything with our visual field, but we don't observe. Now, our attention is like a spotlight, and sometimes it feels like we just walk and this spotlight is totally out. So we just see everything, but our brain, it feels like doesn't digest it or doesn't process it. But when we observe, when we pay active attention, we have a spotlight and we put the spotlight there and there and there. And then we pay active attention and we are more in this observing mode. And that's exactly the first step to access the System 2, or also to go in this observing mode, what Sherlock Holmes is so famous for. The next part of this quote talks about engagement. We have to be motivated to observe something. It's like when we are not motivated or when we are not engaged in what we want to do, then our brains will make it again passively, right? Because we are not so interested in it. So why should our brain now put all this effort and energy into the task where we are not even engaged in or not even motivated for? So the second part is to be motivated and engaged in what we want to do. On a macro level, our mindset has to support our effort. Imagine we tell ourselves that we are too stupid to learn, or we are too old to learn something new, or we are too stupid to observe, or we are too old to observe, or something like that, which consciously or unconsciously holds us back. And in my opinion, we all can do it, just we have to put in the work. Some people learn faster, some people learn slower, but in the end we all can do it. It comes all down to practice. When we want to get better at something, in our case at observing and also thinking like Sherlock Holmes, we have to put in the work. There's no substitute for it. Maria Konnikova in her book Mastermind talked about Sherlock Holmes, of course a fictional character, but still, for the sake of this example, said Sherlock was training from young age his observational and thinking skills. Of course, maybe many of us are not as young anymore as children, but still, Even if we don't have all so much time, when we put in the energy and effort to train something, to get good at something, I believe we can all do it when we really want it. So the last of these 4 points is to put in the practice, put in the training, and actively engage with what we want to get better in. And all those 4 points I just mentioned here are really essential for the next 5-step process of Sherlock Holmes thinking. What are we ourselves bringing to a situation? We are approaching a problem, and it makes in many cases a difference in which mood we are. When we are in a good mood, we tend to be more patient. When we are in a less good mood, we tend to be less patient. It also matters if we are aware or not aware of our cognitive biases. For example, the confirmation bias, which says that we tend to look for information which are confirming our theory. So of course this is problematic when we have to objectively analyze a problem and we have the confirmation bias. So we just look for confirming evidence, but we don't see all the evidence or information which is there. So that's why it's important to know yourself when we approach a problem. Also, our environment can influence us more than we would like it. The weather is a good example. On a sunny, beautiful day, many of us have an elevated mood, which can make us more agreeable and less suspicious. On a rainy day, we could be more overly suspicious. The point is that even our environment can influence us and we have to be aware of it. Closer scrutiny from multiple angles and multiple approaches. This step is to gather facts, and only facts which are really there, not just using our eyes or our visual perception, but all our senses. It is about being mindful and paying active attention. It is basically going into our observing mode and not just merely seeing. After observation comes that creative space, that time to reflect and explore the ins and outs of your ethic called imagination. We like to jump too fast to conclusions, which could prove fatal. This step is there to distance from the problem at hand, to take a break, to let our imagination take control. Maria Konnikova talks in her book about different types of distancing. Many of us know the shower thought. We step into the shower and suddenly we have a great thought about a problem we thought 1 hour ago without even actively thinking about the problem. And all these distancing techniques have in common that we are engaged in something different. We put the main problem to the back of our mind and let our mind deal with it unconsciously. It could be a physical distancing, taking a walk, literally walking away from the problem for a time, or distancing through an unrelated activity, like playing an instrument, taking a shower, or again, walking. Something where we are not too much engaged and not too little engaged. When you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. In many cases, it is best to go with the highest probability because, well, it has the highest probability. When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Now when it turns out is when the highest probable assumption is wrong. Close out the impossible and realize that the impossible is not the improbable, or the improbable is not the impossible. And here we have to be aware of our cognitive biases, like for example the confirmation bias or the narrative fallacy. We can learn from both, from our failure and from our success. It is important to reflect on our process, and we can look at how we dealt with a problem, because that can show us where we have to improve something or where we could make something better, or actually also where we did something good. We are a team manager. The productivity of our team members was normally stable and not so much fluctuating, but now it's strongly fluctuating without any explanation. Biases such as the confirmation bias could influence how we interpret the data and perceive the situation. Through data analysis, I discovered that the fluctuations coincided with the implementation of a new project management system and increased client demands. Also, one member reduced from full to half-time work. I noticed that team members were experiencing increased stress levels and were probably confused due to the new system's complexity and lack of training. What I did here was I jumped to a conclusion. That's wrong. Only the facts. I'm stuck. There are those stronger client demands, but something isn't fitting. Taking a break from it and going for a walk. Realizing on the walk another fact. When one of the team members, who works now half-time due to children at home, is absent, the productivity goes down, and when she's there, it's high. Productivity is lately extremely fluctuating. We observed stressful team members. Another fact is that coincidentally, the new system was implemented and clients have more demand. before I jump too early to the conclusion that this is the reason for the fluctuating productivity. When I took a walk, I realized that a team member went at the time the new system was implemented in half-time work. On the days she is there, the productivity is higher. Now, the first conclusion seemed logical, but actually also not. We said the productivity is fluctuating. The first conclusion would indicate that productivity is always low. The second conclusion seemed more likely. Either the employee has a great effect on the other team members as a great leader, or she is the person who drives all the productivity in the team. This has to be further investigated. In this case, it was somewhat successful. The one employee was the main reason. But we can't say 100% because reality is too complex. What I learned from it all is that I can't jump too fast to conclusions. Now we drift from the topic of thinking to a related and interconnected topic, namely that of memory. How is Sherlock Holmes remembering all that information or also storing all that information? I consider that a man's brain originally is like a little empty attic, and you have to stock it with such furniture as you choose. I find it a helpful analogy to think of our memory as an attic, where we can store the information that we want to store. A fool takes in all the lumber of every sort that he comes across, so that the knowledge which might be useful to him gets crowded out, or at best is jumbled up with a lot of other things, so that he has a difficulty in laying his hands upon it. Now, the skillful workman is very careful indeed as to what he takes into his brain attic. The whole point is to be aware of what we put in our attic. Can we influence what we put in our attic? Yes. Maybe not to 100%, but I would say to a big percentage of that. Firstly, we can just decide to not consume junk information. So when we are not exposed to some junk information, we don't consume it even not unconsciously. Second, when we are engaged in our system Holmes, in our system 2, we tend to remember better, especially when we are engaged in it, when we are motivated, when we pay active attention, when we are mindful in that moment, and when our mindset supports us. If you're interested in more videos on the topic of thinking, maybe you're interested in my videos on cognitive biases or my videos on mental models. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and as always, I wish you a fantastic day.